This was a story that 60 Minutes put out, and it made the rounds on Twitter quite a bit. Here we have it. In Ukraine, U.S. tax dollars are funding more than just military aid. CBS writes, this is in conjunction with the 60 Minutes video segment. Earlier in September, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made his fourth trip to Ukraine since Russia invaded. He stood next to Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba at a press conference and stressed that the U.S. would continue to aid Ukraine. The United States is committed to empowering Ukraine to write its own future, Blinken said at a press conference while in Ukraine. In the crucible of President Putin's brutal and ongoing war, the United States and Ukraine have forged a partnership that is stronger than ever and growing every day. Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who served as the commander of the U.S. Army in Europe until 2017, said the assistance has been crucial to Ukraine's survival. Without that sort of aid, I think Ukraine would have probably been overrun, defeated, certainly would have lost a lot more, Hodges said. Now, here's where it gets a little bit unique from a coverage standpoint. The war has also impacted Ukraine's financial standing, with the country's economy contracting by an estimated 31% last year, according to the United States Agency for International Development, more commonly referred to as USAID. The U.S. government is subsidizing small businesses in Ukraine, including Tatiana Abramova's knitwear company, to keep them afloat. There's Tatiana's knitwear company right there. American officials from USAID helped Abramova find new customers overseas. Oh, that's nice. In the midst of war, her company is supporting over 70 families. Especially in the condition of war, we have to work, she said. We have to pay taxes. We have to pay wage, salary to our employees. We have to work. Don't stop. The U.S. government has also bought seeds and fertilizer for Ukrainian farmers. America is covering the salaries of Ukraine's first responders, all 57,000 of them. The U.S. funds divers who clear unexploded ammunition from the country's rivers to make them safe again for swimming and fishing. All right, well, that part is only fair, I would say. Americans, however, here at home, this is later in the article, face their own financial challenges, and many question if the country should be sending so much money overseas. Senator Lindsey Graham feels that some of the best money the U.S. has ever spent. Here's what we've gotten for our investment. We haven't lost one soldier. We reduced the combat power of the Russian army by 50%, and not one of us has died in that endeavor, Graham said. This is a great deal for America. The outcome of the war may be decided by America's willingness to keep paying. Lieutenant Alexander Sharish.
You really needed to work more Blanche Dubois in there if you're going to do Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, I probably should have. They just would have slowed it down a little bit, you know. I was trying to keep it more up-tempo, but note taken. A father of two who enlisted on the day Russia invaded Ukraine pointed to the cost for Ukrainians. Ukrainians pay with their lives, he said, and I believe and I hope that their lives cost much more than money, much more than taxpayers' money. All right, now look, I won't make the disingenuous argument that some people make when they say that, hey, money spent in Ukraine could be money spent here, because it's not, because as we know, our government wouldn't spend any money on us here. It would go to some other bullshit boondoggle, right? So I'm not going to go as far as to say, hey, we could have health care if we just stopped funding Ukraine. No, because, we would never receive this kind of investment here no matter what. But it is a little extra insulting, and I feel like now the Republicans are starting to make some hay out of this, at least the Freedom Caucus people. Matt Gaetz just said he's putting an amendment in whatever spending bill is finally approved on to avert a government shutdown. At this point, they're not going to avert a government shutdown. It'll be whatever bill gets us out of the government shutdown. He's going to try to insist on no more aid to Ukraine. I don't know how well they'll be able to hold the line on that. But, that position is going to start becoming more politically viable every day. And it's going to pay off more and more every day that this goes on, especially when you see, like the subsidization of the entire Ukrainian ecosystem, basically. From, their exports to, obviously, that woman had her knitwear business. At a certain point, I think people are going to think, hey, where's ours? What about us? And I don't know how much longer it will be politically viable to keep sending all of this money, because at a certain point, that nationalist argument that these Freedom Caucus ballbusters are making is going to start winning the day more and more and more. It already is winning the day more and more. At the beginning of the war, support for Ukraine was 70%. Now it's down to 48%, just a year and change later. At this same pace, it'll be down under 30% by the time we go to vote next November. And so I think the fact that 60 Minutes, which is hardly an anti-establishment program, did a piece like that highlighting the fact that, hey, it's not just the military aid. Look at the assistance that we're giving to the people of Ukraine when people here get almost none of that same help.
Okay, I got to say, just to do a little bit of media analysis and history here. So CBS, ironically, isn't also ran in the news business. They've never really been able to get in on the, post deregulation of the equal time standards gravy train, where everybody went to turning their news divisions into profit centers. CBS, for whatever reason, was never quite able to roll with that change and take advantage of it. But CBS at one time was the gold standard of TV journalism. 60 Minutes is a remnant of that golden age of CBS. Right. CBS was, before you had HBO documentaries and things like that, you had CBS doing these special reports and, really, just really legit television journalism. It's my interpretation of the fact that they seem to be the only real TV news that keeps trying to go after this is there is some element of an awareness of that legacy and the culture of CBS, I find, and particularly around 60 Minutes, because it's the last bit of that. And every now and then they'll try to go off the reservation and do real journalism, relative to other TV stations. Right. So I feel like that's what's going on here, because they're the only ones who keep. You remember they tried to do a report about the weapons, and then they pulled it.
Right. That was them. That's right. I forgot about that. Yes,
that's what I'm saying. This is a pattern where, they still feel like they need to uphold that legacy of being legitimate journalists in some way, particularly where 60 Minutes is concerned. So just an interesting side note there on the fact that it's only CBS who keeps trying to do these stories about where our money is going and what's going on inside Ukraine. Nobody else wants to even touch this subject. But in terms of what's going on there itself, if the American people were fat, happy, and prosperous, this isn't the first time by any means that we've dumped billions of dollars into another nation with questionable government institutions and leaderships to prop up its military or its society. I mean, we do that all over the world, just not in such a visible and extreme way. But the American people are suffering. We just saw the poverty rate increased at the fastest clip in American history. Yep. And in that context, when you tell people you're not only paying for weapons, you're giving money to small businesses and helping them find overseas buyers, how are the American people not going to say, well, why not us? And you're right. As far as they're concerned, fuck the American people in the ear. They wouldn't do it anyway.
Right, austerity is the MO anyway.
Right, but it really brings into sharp relief. And you see that more and more. You see that argument. Like, we're doing things for the Ukrainians that we would never do for the American people. And even if, setting aside how you feel about the war and whether we should be involved in this, that's an argument you really can't get around, because it is exposing how sick, corrupt, and abusive our government is, because anytime our government demonstrates, as it did during COVID, that in the end, all of its excuses for the things that it can't do are excuses, that exposes it for the really illegitimate, I would argue, government that it is. It's not a legitimate democratic government. It's an oligarchy, where you get to select from a panoply of people who are approved by wealthy, powerful interests that no one elected. In the end, you're voting for their chosen representatives. You're never voting for the people's representatives, and that's why the people are always last on the government's agenda.
Right. If we could uplift their entire private sector, which is basically what we're doing, for, I would say probably a third of what we've paid them, because most of the money has been to weapons. So let's say it costs us $30 billion to prop up their entire private sector, right? You're telling me we can't have a federal jobs program here at home, but we can find overseas business for a Ukrainian knitwear company, like a mom and pop knitting company? Like, are you serious? Like, at a certain point, doesn't a light bulb have to go off in people's minds? Yeah, it just exposes the lie of austerity here at home. Like, look at all that we can do for a fraction of what is floated as extreme here, by our media, not just conservative media, but liberal media. Also, there was a whole section of this report that I didn't even bother putting in our exhibit. A whole section of this report had to do with oversight of funds. Well, we're going to oversee these funds to make sure that there's no waste. Well, what do you mean, like there's no waste? You mean we wouldn't want our aid going to knitwear companies, right? Like if that's not waste, what is waste? You know what I mean? I mean, there's actual theft, there's actual criminality, which they mention that some of the weapons were, confiscated or intercepted by criminal elements in Ukraine. Maybe the same criminals who went rogue and blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which we'll talk about later in the show. I don't know what they were talking about there, but like, if what we just read about doesn't constitute waste, then what does? Like, what does your oversight even mean if we're using this money in ways that I think a lot of people would already be shocked to learn that the money is being used?
Yeah, like the CBS article, they tried to walk that line. Like, they gave the woman the quote, "In war, we must pay taxes. There must be business." And it pointed out that she employs 70 people. So okay, yeah, fair enough. But you're not doing that here, right? Like, you could make the arguments that people need that support here. That if you
it's not the woman's fault. I mean, hey, she should take what she can get, obviously, right? No hard feelings against her. It's not about that. Yeah, but it's about what you just said.
And not only that, in terms of a federal jobs program, our infrastructure is fucking falling apart. It's falling apart. America's
like
roads,
there's no demand.
Bridges, the Brooklyn Bridge, I think, gets a C minus. Do we have to? And sadly, I can answer my own question. I was going to say, do we have to wait until the bridges start falling down? Yes. Right. That's how we do. At this point, we're going to wait until there's a horrific tragedy, horribly, it costs, hundreds of lives. And even then, they're going to try to make it about that specific bridge or that specific road. So there is plenty of work for a federal jobs program doing exactly what they were mostly hired to do during the Depression. Go work on infrastructure. Go build the roads and bridges. So it's not like we don't need it. It's not like it would just be make work kind of stuff for people. We really need people to go out and do those things. If we could do this, we could certainly do that. And any time that that's made clear to the American people, it's not good for this government. It just exposes this government as the illegitimate oligarchy that it is.
Please clap.